Hi, I'm Sam Mendes, the director of Road to Perdition, and I'm delighted you've bought or rented this Blu-ray version, this new Blu-ray version of a movie I'm really proud of. It's incredible for me to watch this film on Blu-ray. I was a bit of a Blu-ray skeptic to begin with. I thought, well, you know, the movie looked pretty good to begin with. How can it be better? But the truth is, when you look at it and when you know it intimately, as I do, it really is astonishing, the difference. And I think particularly on behalf of Conrad Hall, who is now no longer with us, but who shot this movie and won the Academy Award for it, I think he's smiling down on us from up high, because I think he would be as astonished and delighted as I am at the way the film looks. I think in particular, the last scene between Tom Hanks and Paul Newman in the rain, I never thought I'd see every single raindrop in the scene, but on this transfer I really do. And the depth and the colors and the texture are really a joy to behold. So with great pride, I hope you enjoy the film, and thanks very much.
As one of the most celebrated cinematographers in the history of motion pictures, Conrad Hall helped redefine the language of film. From his visually arresting black and white work to bold technical choices, Hall worked to break new ground with each film he shot. His astounding resume features some of the most beautiful and unique films of the past half-century, and has garnered an incredible 10 Academy Award nominations, resulting in 3 Oscars. In 1994, Hall received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Society of Cinematographers, 8 years prior to what many consider to be his best work in Road to Perdition.
Conrad was a lover. Conrad was a Tahitian. You know, people forget that.
He was the son of a fairly famous author. Right off the bat, you know, you think, wow, well, that's a pretty interesting story. My grandfather having the success, both, you know, literary, but then also Hollywood, sort of enjoying the novels with Mutiny on the Bounty and so forth. You know, I don't know a son alive that doesn't want his dad's approval and doesn't want the respect and sort of admiration of their father. So when my dad was trying to think about what he was going to do, you know, for his future, the logical choice was to go into, you know, writing, journalism, and certainly it was something that I think he felt that he had inside of him until he got to USC. Attempted to major in it and ended up bombing pretty radically. So when he bombed out of creative writing, I think he got a D or D+, and went back to the class catalog. He found cinema, more of an art form, I think, back then, but not really thought of as a viable economic solution to, you know, making money and, you know, having a life. I think he sort of saw a connection between the sort of craft and technology that was available and his interest in telling stories. He had some friends and some partners when he got out of film school, and they started a company called Canyon Films. And it was kind of an interesting time, you know, for young people in the film industry, not because film was all that new, but because television was that new. So there was all kinds of desire for product. And then it came time to sort of figure out who was going to do what, because as a company, they hadn't really sort of divided their skills into, you know, sort of concrete roles. By chance, my dad happened to pick the cinematographer name out of the hat, and that's how he chose his career. I think my dad's cinematography, if he had to sort of put a label on it, is that despite the fact that film stocks changed from black and white to color, his cinematography was always black and white oriented.
His composition was extremely simple, not simplistic, but just simple and meaningful.
He taught me a lot about to be simple and not using too many lights. One big light sometimes is enough for the whole scene, and then not leave things in darkness. And then he really was a master of that.
And because you don't have the natural separation of colors, in black and white photography, you've got to make the separation through your lighting and, you know, through your framing.
There's a sort of concentration on what's in the frame. You know, color can often be a real distraction, I think, to content and composition and light. And I think that's probably what Conrad took most from the black and white.
You know, he was the last of the generation who moved between black and white and color. And, you know, back and forth, not just from black and white to color, but back to black and white again, you know, when they were still making black and white movies on a regular basis. And he used to talk, you know, longingly of the days when he could shoot black and white. You know, one of the things that we talked about when we started Road to Perdition was, you know, how great it would be if, or what the movie would look like if it were just, as he would say, values, you know, just grades of black and white.
For my father, it was always the artistry of using light to tell a story, to create drama or a mood, to create separation, and I don't think he ever lost that set of language skills. And when you look at his lighting, he was constantly using hard light when most people went to soft light, but in a unique way.
And I think that's the essential elements of Conrad's composition, you know, talking about Searching for Bobby Fischer or Class Action. All those movies have this really, really contemporary, beautiful, powerful imagery, which are also supported by his very simple lighting style.
There was a certain quality of melancholy that Connie carried with him that he was very in touch with. And you feel it, I think, in the films.
He always had the knack of, what is this scene about? How does this shot impact the story? And how can I use the camera to make that come alive and be a reality?
And Conrad was the master of metaphors, you know, master of composition that would evoke certain emotions without being too obvious.
He had certain things he liked to do. He liked to trail into the scene, offer detail. You know, he didn't always want to start exactly at the beginning of the scene. He wanted to add a little bit of an introduction, as it were.
Well, his work was subservient to the story. And Connie had a great feeling and knowledge of his craft to know enough that how he could translate the story into what his vision was.
It was a very hard challenge. I mean, how do you do a film about somebody playing chess? It's a small board, it's always the same thing, and if you're not a chess maniac, you don't even know what those guys are doing, you know? And by the use of these close-ups and the light and everything, he's made this film completely stand out.
Because he shot it all from the eye line of the child. Chess had always seemed a distant intellectual pursuit. Somehow it seemed visceral and emotional and suffused with a different kind of power, and it was entirely because of the way in which it had been shot and lit.
One of the great shoots for me that anybody ever did is in Butch Cassidy, The Raindrops Are Falling on My Head number with Paul Newman and Catherine Ross. That's such a phenomenal look, and that's Connie, but that's outside. And I think Connie, if he was here, would say, yeah, I was happier when I was dealing with outside stuff.
His sense of the land, of light outside, he'd take what nature has given and he would magnify it.
It was always a huge plus to have Conrad along, because you knew whatever the elements of the story were in the screenplay, he would make them work.
One of the things I think of is I think of that bicycle wheel, turning around and around and around, and the spokes becoming kaleidoscope-like. I have no way of knowing whether that was George Roy Hill or Conrad Hall, but there are so many of those in Connie's movies. Seeing Paul Newman through the pickets of the fence. And I think that's Connie's search for the truth. If I were alive during the time of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and I was standing on this hillside with Butch and Sundance and Etta, maybe I'd be seeing him through these pickets. It makes it real. It puts me in that place. I think that's, you know, Connie.
My dad was relatively new and wanted to take some chances, and there was a lot of day for night on that, and apparently during the process some dailies came back and it was just not there. And not knowing what to do, he begged the laboratory to, you know, print it up and to see what they could get out of it. And actually when the footage came back, there was something about it that was uniquely interesting and different. That footage could have been my dad's downfall. But on the other hand, you know, working with the laboratory, he ended up with some pretty spectacular footage, albeit not what the studio or he was expecting. Ended up, you know, getting a nomination out of that film.
He was quite honest about how some things would sort of happen, like he said once on Fat City, for instance, that they shot a lot of kind of documentary observational footage for the opening sequence. I think it was in a pre-production period. And he said they put the wrong stock on us. He put a higher speed stock on than he thought, and everything was really kind of bright and blown out. Now, I don't know if that's just him telling a story or what, but the exteriors have this a wonderful blown out feel, and he took it all the way through the film.
Many, many times he lit shots, created images, framed scenes because things happened that he could not foresee or even wanted to control.
To have the confidence to allow scenes to happen in front of you and not always to dictate to them sometimes teaches you more about the scene than you thought you knew.
We don't always know about each other's happy accidents. I mean, the only way you're going to find out about that is if somebody comes out and says it, talks about it, as Connie did in Cold Blood, when he had that wonderful shot of the effect of tears running down Robert Blake's face when he's standing by a window. He said that was purely an accident. He had a light coming through the window, and it was supposedly a rain sequence outside, and so they had droplets on the window, and this thing happened, and he looked at it and he saw it, and then he got the director and he said, "Look at this, this is great." So they shot it, and they captured it, and as he said, that's a happy accident.
You know, but you've got to be clever enough to spot them when they come along, and also, I kind of only half believe them. You know what I mean? You sort of, you know, it's like saying someone splashing paint on a canvas is an accident. There's not much accidental. It's just being open to inspiration.
Ultimately, Connie was not someone who said, "I know what let's do, let's throw this out and do this." He was one who would figure out how to make what he had work. And he was very, very good at that.
He did very bold choices, and there's two ways you can do bold choices. One is because you're ignorant, the other one because you just don't like the establishment. You don't like what has been done.
Connie was very, very much right in the forefront of that change that happened in cinematography, in mainstream cinematography, in mainstream Hollywood filmmaking. To see somebody like Connie shooting a Hollywood movie and taking those kinds of risks that they did, I mean, then that sort of said, well, we can actually do that. I don't have to, you know, operate under a sort of set of rules with a certain formula, you know. I think that's the big influence.
To allow flares in is to indicate out of control. When you have a pristine picture, it subjectively sends off ideas of control.
Normally, you would have 3-4 grips constantly trying to control the light so there would be no flare. He forget about it. He just told him to not do that, and he started using that to tell the story.
And like Butch Cassidy in the Sundance Kid, he actually practically took out all the colors, actually. It was only one or two colors there, and in the desert, and it was bright, and you know that was the style for the movie.
He was one of the first guys to process film in a unique way. Tendency with most cinematography out there, and certainly back in the day, was you create the fattest negative possible, the most opportunity to affect your latitude both in the underexposure range and then the overexposure range. For my dad, he wanted to, what he called, torture the film stock. And so what he would do is, this light for instance, he would read it and then he would overexpose it 2 stops. Now why would anybody do that? Because he knew that certain film stocks had the latitude to be printed back down in ways that created an image that was softer, was more gentler in terms of color saturation, and more pleasing to his eye.
I don't think he woke up every day and said, I'm here to break the rules. I think he was chasing the truth, and sometimes the rules didn't lend themselves to finding the truth.
He was not somebody that was interested in producing a film that would look like either something he'd done before, something else somebody else had done before, or something that, you know, was done by the rules of a studio.
The iconic shots from Cool Hand Luke, even though, you know, he was very suspicious of that because he felt the studio had over-controlled it. The stuff, you know, all the reflections in the sunglasses, that was all Conrad.
He wasn't a slave to a meter, for instance. He wouldn't religiously take readings. I mean, I spoke to kind of guys at the laboratory and they would say, yeah, I mean, Connie's, you know, printer lights would be all over the place, but that didn't matter because he liked shooting at the lens with a lens wide open. So when he lit something and it looked like what he wanted, he would just shoot it wide open because that's what it looked better, you know, the depth of field and everything looked better to him, and that's what he would do.
One of the reasons that Conrad was able to break certain style and break away from the conventional, almost a cliche way that Hollywood movies were photographed is because he did receive the Oscars. It's because his work as a cinematographer was admired. It's because he was an artist, because he knew what he was doing.
You know, he was a great collaborator, and I think probably one of the most extraordinary people I've ever worked with. One of the things that, the first things I did with Conrad was before the first day of American Beauty, I said, so, you know, we've had all these discussions about how we're going to shoot it and what it's going to look like, but I said, look, you know, I've never made a movie. At what point do I say action? And he said, well, you know, the sound guy will say rolling, and then I'll say set, you know, and then you can say action. So great, fantastic. Okay, so I was building up, okay, set, action, okay, fine. So we get there to the first day of American Beauty, and, you know, little voice is set, and I say action. And I feel like, you know, wow, I just said action, you know, my first movie. And then you do the scene, and then I think, why is everyone looking at me? You know, he leans over and says, you've got to say cut. So he forgot that one bit. With great artists, you know, you have to find another language, you know. Sometimes you'd use quite impressionistic terms to describe what you wanted, a feeling or a look or a color. And so that's how we sort of developed a dialogue.
When you ask Conrad for his opinion on something, like if you wanted him to see a picture that you did, or some of your work, you had to be prepared for a critique, a real critique, because Connie would say whatever was on his mind, however he felt about it. He didn't care whether he hurt your feelings or not. He was going to tell you the truth. And that's what I loved about the man. He was just, whatever was on his mind came right out of his mouth, and in a nice way. He was always nice about everything, but he'd say it as he saw it.
He also had a really strong sense of what was honest. You know, the camera was not something to be toyed with. Part of our movie took place on a Russian boat, and I can't remember for the life of me why, but I had a shot in my head where we were sort of off the boat shooting onto the boat. And he looked at me and said, why would you do that? Whose point of view is that? Is that the seagull's point of view? What? And he was right. He was absolutely right.
It's difficult to describe why a relationship works, particularly between a 34-year-old, as I was then, you know, theatre director who'd never touched a, you know, a frame of film in his life, and a 73-year-old who had been working his entire lifetime on film. But it worked. The first week was rocky, you know. I wasn't confident enough to really be clear about what I wanted. He wasn't confident enough to tell me when he thought it wasn't very good, you know. So but the moment he became able to tell me when he thought the acting wasn't great and I thought the camera, the lighting wasn't great, was the moment it started to work. It was just about honesty, and as a consequence, it was feisty, you know. We did have our moments.
Initially, it was sort of tempestuous. I mean, Conrad was probably the finest, finest American cinematographer. My body of work was fairly slim. People were there because Warren Beatty was there, not because Glenn Caron was there, and I think Connie among them. My methodology at that time was to be someone who planned. And Connie, it was almost jazz-like. He would see the scene, and he almost didn't want to know because he wanted to be able to experience the scene for the first time and feel his reaction to it and move accordingly. Planning and jazz don't necessarily go together all the time. So it took me a while to understand that at times it's better to lay back and let other people do what they do. It's interesting when you work with people that you admire enormously.
When he did Road to Perdition, which I thought was his best work, probably, or close to it, and I told him so. And that was, to me, a masterpiece of cinematography.
Road to Perdition is almost an opera. It's an operatic film, but it never uses highly dramatic, recognizable element to bring up the drama, and still, it's a very dramatic film. In the light, in the way it's lit, in the way it's composed, it's the way the camera moves. It's very, very dramatic, but profoundly grounded on realism.
I mean, it could almost be a black and white film. He did say he wanted the final print to be more black and white than it was. He wanted to do a processing on it that gave it much more contrast and less saturation than it actually has as a final image. But you look at those compositions and the lighting in that film, it could almost be a black and white film, the way he approached it, you know.
It's a classic film noir, and I personally like film noir. I mean, I grew up on silent films, black and white films, and that was wonderful that Conrad could create any style really he wanted for that particular movie.
It was just such a simply but yet beautifully composed movie that composition will never go away from my memory.
Things like action and especially violence, he was particularly offended by.
He was very resistant to Road to Perdition in the first instance, and I think that if it hadn't been me and we hadn't already had this great time on American Beauty, I'm not sure he would have done it. You had to remind him about the theme of the film a lot in order to stop him thinking it was, you know, violence for the sake of violence.
Where it didn't make a comment, you know, where the film didn't make a comment about the violence, that's what he really despaired about modern American films, really.
You know, it's not my kind of film. I like moral and ethical dilemma, and without a lot of shooting and that kind of thing is what I prefer to do. But on the other hand, anytime Sam Mendes wants me to shoot a film for him, I'll be there.
Conrad deeply liked and respected Sam Mendes. He wanted to work with and help and be a participant in Sam Mendes.
I would bet you that young cinematographers, kids who were still in film school, etc., talk about Conrad Hall almost on a daily basis, because Not only was he so successful and so honored, the work is so startling and it's different.
How he balanced so perfectly a tendency to do things as real and as naturalistic as possible and a very high sense of drama.
His impact speaks for itself. It's the films that he worked on that are left behind that will last forever, that are classics. It's his work and the memory of him as a person, actually, his humility and his just love of the craft, just love of filmmaking.
It was so sad when he passed away because, from a selfish standpoint too, I wanted to see more of his work. Besides missing the man as a friend, I missed his art.
Conrad Hall lived this life in our communities as directors of photography is an enriching experience to us. And the enriching experience is his technical and professional ability and integrating it with a person of high character and true artistic sensibilities.
I think that Conrad's work is almost flawless. You know, put it this way, he won the Academy Award for both the movies I directed with him as cinematographer, and he deserved it.
Conrad set the bar for a lot of cinematographers. His passion for filmmaking just emanated from him all over the place.
I can't tell you how much I miss him. You know, I mean, I miss him as a person, and I think about him all the time when I'm making a film, all the time. You know, how would Conrad do this? And I don't think I'm the only one. I think there are a lot of cinematographers out there who think the same thing, you know. He had an uncanny ability to just cut out all the bullshit and go straight to the heart of something.
Help you, sir, just looking.
Here to see Tony Calvino.
Yeah, and who are you?
Mike Sullivan.
There are many stories about Michael Sullivan. Some say he was a decent man. Some say there was no good in him at all.
This man is not a superhero. He's a very, very proficient killer. A man who doesn't want his son to find out.
I once spent 6 weeks on the road with him in the winter of 1931. This is our story.
From the Academy Award-winning director of American Beauty, Sam Mendes.
You're often, as a filmmaker, looking for some kind of mythic story or a story that holds a mythic weight.
Comes an epic tale of a father and son transformed by tragedy.
Get out!
What? What's going on?
Get out!
Road to Perdition, you have a feeling that that's not, say, the road to utopia or the road to Bali. You don't want to live this way.
What's Papa's job? He goes on missions for Mr. Rooney. They're very dangerous. That's why he brings his gun.
A man of honor always pays his debts and keeps his word.
Based on the original graphic novel by Max Allan Collins and Richard Piers Rayner, Road to Perdition brings together Hollywood's brightest young talent with Oscar-winning legends in front of and behind the camera, including two-time Academy Award winner Tom Hanks, Oscar-winning screen legend Paul Newman, Oscar nominee Jude Law, and the father and son producing team of Richard and Dean Zanuck.
I had the graphic novel sitting on my desk. I was on the verge of handing it to my assistant to read. I was about halfway out the door when I started flipping through it, and I loved it immediately.
It's a very simple piece to read, and immediately was attracted to it. Sam Mendes, who hasn't made a picture since he won the Academy Award, went for it right away.
When I read it, that was my first response. This is a film. It's meant to be a film. It speaks in images, not in dialogue. It's the story of a hitman for a small-town mob, Irish mob, set in the last mythic American landscape, the 1930s, when there was still space in which to completely lose yourself in the vastness of America.
I'd never seen anything like this on the current horizon. Here's a movie that should be predictable and is utterly unpredictable.
I was looking for a part like this, a character part, and a part that was as far away from anything else I'd ever done as possible, and this was kind of it.
Camera rolling, Mark?
Well, they sent me a script. It was a marvelous part. It was of a size that is appropriate for a gentleman of my age.
Every card that seemed to be played on this just got better and better.
Okay. I had no idea how to open the gas.
It's amazing. You know, you go up and you see Tom Hanks and he's talking to you and you're like, oh yeah, wait, that's Tom Hanks. And that's Jude Law. It's just amazing.
I was thrilled. What's exciting to me about all of these people is they're all cast against type. They're all playing very, very dark figures, very mysterious figures who reveal themselves to be not what they seem.
Now, I never thought I'd be able to be in a movie like this, but I looked at it and I said, well, geez, I felt as though that, oh, I know exactly what to do here. And that was surprising. It was shocking.
There's one thing better than having a great actor, and that's a great actor who's never really done what this part is asking him to do before. And furthermore, he's keen that he tries.
It's upbeat. It just gives you the breath.
The amount that is unspoken that Tom can carry with him as an actor is extraordinary.
Tom is so amazing to work with. You know, he works such incredibly hard, long hours on every day.
Okay, guys, that makes us ready. Quiet, please.
Peter, I can't come to your concert tonight. I'm working.
The reality is these kids just don't know what their dad does for a living.
Working at what? Putting food on your plate, young man.
She doesn't ask too much about his work. He just didn't then. She accepts it. She loves him very much. She's seen her husband come home enough times with blood on his shirt to know that there's stuff going down.
You're a good lad.
He loves his dad dearly, and he wants to get close to him, but there's always that thing. His dad compliments his brother, looks at him, stares at him, but he doesn't say anything.
One of the most interesting thematic strands of the film is the relationship between father and sons.
Who's got a hug for a lonely old man?
The head of the family, played by Paul Newman, is a kind of adoptive parent to him.
Okay, guys, that makes us ready. Quiet, please.
64 Apple, take 5.
Paul Newman was an idea that we all had.
It's a natural law. Sons are put on this earth to trouble their fathers. He's a good bad guy, lovable killer.
Paul, of course, is an incredible person to have on a set.
Well, back to work.
He's always working at it. He comes in having spent hours in his trailer thinking about tiny little pivotal moments, which really is amazing. Having been through the career he's been through, to care that much about it and to not leave anything to chance or think, oh, no, I've done it for 50 years, I can just wing it, you know. He never thinks that. And that's inspiring, I think, to everyone.
Paul, come back the other way a little bit. Just
Paul never changes. He works very hard. We did Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and then The Sting, and then The Verdict. It looks like it's easy, but he gives a lot of thought and a lot of training and preparation for everything that he does.
He's extraordinary. Still like full of beans and energy and inspiration to be better and get better. And I mean, he's already a legend.
Let's drink to Danny's honor and hope that he gets to heaven at least an hour before the devil finds out he's dead.
Danny!
I'm playing Paul Newman's son. I'm sort of Tom's half-brother. I'm a pretty nasty piece of work, I suppose. He's got a big chip on his shoulder. I think he sort of almost plays second fiddle to Tom's character, Mike, because Mike is sort of the favorite son, even though he's not the real son. So there's a lot churned up inside him, and I think this fuels what he does.
Curiosity takes me to a big place. I hop in the back of his car during one of his jobs.
I think you're so smart. You think we don't know? I mean, you've been...
Just looking under the door, has no clue what's going on. All of a sudden, 3 guys die in 5 seconds right in front of his face.
What was that? We're out of here. Jesus Christ, Connor, what the hell are you thinking?
Jesus.
He's really a wonderful discovery. Tyler reminds me of a young Tyrone Power. He's just remarkable.
What is your sport?
Our real sport? Baseball.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
What position?
Shortstop.
The moment he walked in the room, he was clear that he just has something special. I defy anyone not to notice it the moment he walks on screen as well. He also has the air of an old man at times, a great wisdom in the eyes that belies his years.
You saw everything? That's the moment when it all unravels. It ends up being the trigger for the, the tragedy that strikes down at the heart of the family.
Can he keep a secret?
He's my son.
As far as he's concerned, that's the trigger he needed. And then once it gets going, he has to follow it through completely, and he can't just take out Sullivan.
He is the person who sets the story in motion. He is the person that sets Sullivan off on his journey.
It's the worst possible nightmare. Thinking that a witness was being removed from the scene. Turns out instead to be the mother and the youngest child of the Sullivan household. Younger Michael thinks it's his fault, and the older Michael knows that it's his fault. I mean, it's one of these great things where everybody's right and everybody's wrong at the same time.
Tomorrow when they find out we're gone, they're gonna come after us. I have to protect you now.
Now, we are the only 2 left, and we have to kind of come together in order to make it work out.
Out of the bad comes good. Out of the tragedy comes some kind of understanding, some kind of epiphany.
Where are we going?
To Chicago.
Here we go. Pictures up. And background action. And action.
To recreate the mythic qualities of the Midwest during the Depression, the filmmakers brought together an Academy Award-winning team that included editor Jill Bilcock, music composer Thomas Newman, production designer Dennis Gassner.
We have to erode this home so that it has a quality of disrepair, once a prosperous world, but now gone in the Depression.
Special effects coordinator Alan L. Hall.
Okay, that looks pretty good.
Costume designer Albert Wolski.
And action.
As you can see, it's wonderful effects.
And director of photography Conrad L. Hall.
Pull out just a bit soft. There. Picture is up.
It's very simple to put a team like we have, a great team, together when you have a wonderful piece of material.
Nobody said no to us. It's really unbelievable.
They brought them back from the 30s.
I think I'm the only one here without an Oscar.
We did an exploratory recce before we decided to shoot in Chicago. Dennis Gassner had gone out there and he basically said, look, you know, I think the stuff is still here.
Wonderful, isn't it? We've had a great time in sourcing the city of Chicago, which has been a wealth of great imagery for us. East Dundee, little small town look.
There are these great old streets of old hotels, warehouses, industrial areas that are now closed down that still exist. Amazing things that are still there. It's fantastically mythic in its presence.
You do get that kind of like, did Sam somehow send a camera crew back in time in order to capture some of this?
You feel the vastness of the country. You feel the beginnings of the height of the industrial power of the Midwest. And I was very, you know, it sounds corny, but I was moved by it. I went there and I was amazed by it.
We were going to stay in Chicago. We wanted to be able to have complete flexibility, so we needed a stage.
The second floor and the first floor of the Sullivan House.
The state, the Film Commission, helped us clear out the armory, and we built the interior of the Sullivan House and the interior of the Rooney Mansion there.
Wow. It's the first time I've seen a lot of the things here in place, but this is really nice. I've done a lot of period films, and this one seems to be the fusion of all of the things that I've done.
All right, guys, get a white card in there. Coming back on the couch.
I play Frank Nitti, who was the right-hand man of Al Capone. I suppose he is sort of orchestrating things behind the scenes and has to figure out exactly what to do.
Where's my father? Listen, Sonny. The only reason you're still alive is because you're John Rooney's son.
You're being a little short-sighted here, Frank. My father is an old man. I am the future. So don't you ever talk to me that way again.
And there's the guy whose job it is to stop Michael Sullivan. That's McGuire, the reporter, is played by Jude Law.
Excuse me, ma'am. Press.
If you were to ask him what he did, he'd probably tell you he's a photographer. He's a crime scene photographer who specializes in capturing dead bodies in the place of murder.
In Jude, I've always felt there's something very sinister, difficult to pin down, very vain, with a very kind of visible feminine side, very flirtatious, dark, sexy, odd, unknowable. And that's what led me into pushing him as far as I have in much further in that same direction with this character, who really is a very strange man indeed.
Sullivan and his son Michael poses a threat to not only the Rooney legacy, but also the Capone legacy in and around Chicago. So they have to hire someone who's a specialist at tracking people.
It gets narrower and narrower as it goes along, and tighter as a story.
So what are you gonna do?
Something I can't do alone.
All right, guys, the flag sheets, everybody tuck in.
Victory 229 Apple, take 2.
Mark.
Ready?
I'm ready.
I'm making a withdrawal. I want dirty money only. Everything you're holding for Capone.
How much did they take? How much?
2 trains set on the tracks towards each other at high speed.
McGuire, do what you have to. Find them.
And one of them is going to have to come off. One of them is going to have to die. And that affected the way that we shot it, the way that we designed it, the way we conceived it.
Room squad, thank you guys. Let's give it a sweep and then we'll go again. Can you go up and put a flag there or some duvetine?
Acclaimed director of photography Conrad L. Hall was essential in bringing Sam's vision of the film to the screen.
Yeah. Great. No, next one to your right again.
That's good. Thank you very much.
For over 40 years, the 9-time Oscar nominee has delighted audiences with unforgettable cinematic moments.
Turn it to your right.
Winning Academy Awards for his work on Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and his first film with director Sam Mendes,
I would say if we started here.
American Beauty.
I had a love affair with Sam on American Beauty. He's such a great director, and when he was going to do another film, you know, I said, I'm with you.
The fact that I ended up working with a 74-year-old hippie from Tahiti who had shot Cool Hand Luke, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, I kind of relished every day that I had with him because, you know, I think he's a master, and I think that cinematographers like that come along 2 or 3 a generation.
More. Okay, there, I like it dark. I'm having a good time, but I'm tired. Long hours. He has a strong hand on how he sees things.
That's it, don't move it.
Not only photographically, but like every aspect of filmmaking, he's in total control.
The union of him and Conrad is already so well established that you can always sense they're already speaking some language that only they understand.
I feel immensely grateful to him. I mean, I can't really even describe how attached I've become to him.
Anytime Sam Mendes wants me to shoot a film for him, I'll be there. He is such a great director. He is so much a veteran. Oh, basically, it's Orson alive.
When Conrad puts his eye to the eyepiece, everything goes quiet in his own head, and he is absolutely focused.
I'd walk onto the set, and rather than seeing a bunch of lights and cables, I could only see the illuminated set as he wanted it to be. It was truly like going to a museum and seeing paintings. It's like one of the Dutch masters has lit this thing.
He can drive you mad, spending way longer than you ever expect him to setting up one shot. But when you're in the cutting room, when you're in the screening room, when you fought for those extra days, when you sit down and you look at the movie again, you thank God that he was there. There is a seasonal shift in the film. There's a color shift in the film. Everything is in some way linked into telling that story. The way people dress, wear clothes, everything is designed to tell the story of the gradual humanizing of the central character.
Once we find the architecture, then the tonality of the film starts to evolve. A cold world coming into springtime as we go on the road.
Look out for the tractor coming up now. Watch out for the tractor. Watch out for the tractor! Watch out for the tractor!
We made it.
Oh, yeah, we made it.
It's almost impossible in cheerful Technicolor to show the Depression. There was color in those days, but there wasn't also. It's winter, it's cold, so the only thing I can do is pull back as much color as I can. I guess my inspiration was a black and white movie.
It would have been a wonderful film to shoot in black and white. I'm trying to make it monochromatic as I can. Keep it that way.
There was an enormous amount of making weather. We've had paper snow, foam snow, marble snow, ice, real snow, powder, foam, God knows what.
The attention to detail has been incredible. We've done football fields, literally many, many football fields worth of artificial snow.
Winter in the Midwest it's a pretty bleak time. We were out shooting in the woods, and it was winter and it was cold, and man, everything was dead. It was just dead. There was no leaf. I mean, even the ground looked dead.
99.9% of everything you see, we put down. Everything was just so realistic. It was just so nice.
There is a lot of pressure, but there was more pressure on my first movie because I didn't know whether I could make a movie or not. But that's a good sort of pressure, and I've never shirked pressure. I like it. I find it brings out the best of me. Okay, moving around, get your hand on the bottom, that's nice. There, having a good look.
He is such a perfectionist, and he's on top of his game, and he's so prepared.
Movie making, on the whole, made in the head anyway before you start. Storyboard, designs. Everything is discussed in detail before you start, and you need to know how you're going to at least try and tell the story before you begin. I'm just going to make a slight adjustment. Okay, about 6 inches.
He knows what he's doing. A lot of directors can give you instructions, but if you're in trouble, very few of them can get you out of it.
Rest of the shifting, go. When you're adjusting, Sam will take you aside and really get you into the character, let you know what he needs out of you for this particular shot, different angles, what he needs to see. All around, he's just an awesome director.
We should change to the other music, okay? Once Tyler goes.
He's meticulous, and he won't let things ride.
And do little mock bows, whatever.
We're missing something, we've got to find it. And that, ultimately, is just incredibly satisfying.
You feel very safe. You feel like you're in very good hands. I suppose it also makes you feel like you got to raise your game, which is a good feeling. You know, a little bit of fear in the belly is always quite nice.
Marker.
Sam is bringing great consequence to the nature of what essentially is gunplay in this movie. There's a lot of shots of, say, for example, this Thompson submachine gun being put together, because it's not a trivial thing. I think we're trying to do something here in which the psychological aspect of what they're doing has the grander attention on it, as opposed to how cool it looks to fire these weapons.
You can end this now. You got to take him now.
You won't make it. Not with a little boy.
It's a film about the epic qualities of life, which for me are what all the great films are about.
I've always loved you like a son, and now I'm telling you, leave before it's too late.
In a way, the second half of the film is the battle for the soul of his son.
I cannot fight you and them at the same time.
I can take care of myself fine. You think it's my fault this happened?
It was not your fault.
In good storytelling, there's always great paradox. And the only time you can do that is when I think the audience recognizes themselves up on the screen somehow.
You remember your Aunt Sarah? She lives in Perdition. She'll take you in.
Perdition is the name of the town, a mythic place in their memory, in their minds, something that leads them on, a sense of hope.
What are you gonna do?
Just one last thing, and then it's done.
This is the life we chose, the life we lead. And there is only one guarantee. None of us will see heaven.
Michael could.